I looked at the religious groups and their voting from 2020 to 2024 and how there were some shifts. Catholics way upped for Trump. Way more Catholics voted for Trump this year. And then was non-denominational Christians, I feel like, shifted up. Anyway, all these groups shifted over rightward for
Pretty
Trump.
much everybody that believes in God.
Yes, except for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which actually shifted a little bit to the left, not a lot. But that was an interesting finding. And then atheist, non-religious groups, they were much more left than they were in 2020. If you want Trump to fail, and by extension you want the country to fail, so let's take out the middle piece. If you want the country to fail just so you can say you're right, you're in a really bad place.
We're here in our new studio. I'm super stoked. Great show today. We're going to break down the election. But before we get to that, we have great sponsors, many great sponsors, beautiful sponsors. We don't have enough sponsors. So if you feel like sponsoring and getting the word out, like this is important to you to like have an interest in protecting Utah and its values, please reach out, sponsor. But today's sponsor, Votive. Votive's awesome is because they provided a software and a platform, really an all-inclusive one-stop shop to run and manage your campaigns. So if you're thinking, praying, considering maybe running for a race, whether it's this year's, there's a lot of city council, mayor races, all of that kind of stuff, or in 2026, getting involved, reach out to Votive. They'll show you how you can do it for super cheap, be super effective. And the word on the street is that pretty much everyone that used them, well, pretty much all of the winners in Utah used Votive. So if you want to be a winner, check out Votive. They'll show you the way. Great. So today's guest, I'm super stoked to have him on. I've been trying to get him on for months, and
Yeah, right.
now I finally got him. Zac Wilson. Zac's awesome. I first remember meeting you at something at UVU. I don't remember if it was like the Lincoln Day one.
Something like that. There were so many events where we're just crisscrossing all over the state, right? Meet the candidates, all Lincoln Day dinners. I forget which one it was, but yeah.
Yeah, I just remember like the first time I met you, I was like, dude, this guy does not seem that old. And I didn't know how old you were, but I'm like, dude, he has to be like at least my age, but maybe a little bit older. Like, and then I saw your video when I think you had COVID, and I don't remember what event it was at. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm like, how 28?
Yeah, 29. I sent that video up. I think it was the Cache County. No, sorry, not Cache, Carbon. Anyway, I sent a video up. It wasn't COVID, fortunately. It was some kind of cold. But 29 years old, threw my hat in the ring. And yeah, it turned some heads for sure.
And I was like, wait, what? Because I didn't really I was so busy just kind of living in my own world, getting things going.
Well, running a campaign. You got a lot going on.
On the Senate race.
Your business.
Which I should have been more thoughtful of your race because I live in that district. But I was like, didn't know anything at that time about who was running. I was like, hey, I was just so focused on the Senate race. But then I saw your video, and that was like the first time I ever heard you talk about things you cared about. And I was like, yes. And I was getting super stoked. And I don't know what the vibe was, but I was like, dude, this guy's it. And like the thing that is cool is you do politics because it's super important to you. And I think most people see a young person, they're like, oh, career politician. Dude, you have a career that's already successful. And I think that's what we need is people that are successful and young that have proven, hey, I can get it done in the private sector. And now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was I didn't grow up with any politics in my life, really. I don't know who my parents were voting for. We never talked about it. I didn't even really know what a Republican or a Democrat was until college, if you can believe it. Took a poli-sci class at BYU with Dr. Magleby, total legend, and got really interested. Took an economics class as well, Dr. Curl, just these legendary professors down there. And I got really interested. I've always loved people. In fact, one of the things, when I came into college, I was like studying between something like either business or family marriage therapy because I love people and love organizations and things like that. And so politics was a unique blend because I've always, in finance, which is what I ended up studying, there's a lot of macroeconomic news, what's going on with China, what's going on, in Europe and all this stuff. And so politics for me was a strange blend of leadership, philosophy, ethics, and doing the thing that's best for the greatest amount of people. So for that, it's just very interesting. So I love talking about it. And so been in charge of the Young Republicans. I came back from New York. I guess like a little bit of background. I'm from Utah, from Holiday. Went to Olympus High School. Went on a mission out to New York City. Came back to BYU, studied finance. Moved back to New York City. Worked for J.P. Morgan in their headquarters, and obviously ended up choosing finance and that path and all that. But came back to Utah during COVID. Got introduced to the Utah Young Republicans. Wasn't sure about joining at first. Ended up doing that, getting some really good interaction with elected officials and things. And ultimately, when the seat came up, Mitt Romney retired. John Curtis said, "I'm going to run up for the Senate. Throw my hat in the ring there." I ran for his old seat. It was the last day of filing. Drove up to the Capitol, literally the last day. It was, I forget what it was, early January.
Like January 8th.
Exactly. I drive up to the Capitol, call my dad as I'm walking in. I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, but I'm not for sure yet." It's like 4:45, right? It closes at 5. Walk in there, just feeling it out, just kind of, and ultimately, my friend who works in the lieutenant governor's office, I didn't even know he did. He walked out and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I'm here to file." And so I went back in, signed the paperwork, and we went for it. So great experience, really good time. But it was my first time doing anything political. Really, of course, the Young Republicans, but that's, that was more of an interest and a passion. But we can get into that more as to why.
We should. Well, and like just as like a quick little hey, if you don't know how to get involved and you're below the age of 40, you got to be involved with Young 100%. Republicans.
Yeah, it's 18 to 40. It's a political, social networking group. We get together, we meet with all the elected officials, we do events. Watch parties, things like that. And so it's very, it's a good group. So.
Well, and it serves. Like, if you're like, I don't 100%. Know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, and I want to be involved and I want to help get the right people in the office. There's so many opportunities. Like, I get the emails and it's like, hey, come make phone calls, come do whatever. There's this opportunity to go down to Nevada, Arizona, whatever.
Totally.
Go fight in this battleground state.
Mm-hmm.
You tee up those opportunities so 100%. Nicely.
The amount of people that reached out to us saying, "Come help my campaign. We need some volunteers. We need that. Come knock doors. Come make phone calls. Let's go to Arizona. Let's go to Nevada." We went out. I didn't go to this one, but people were out in Pennsylvania. People were in Michigan. It's pretty cool. There were, I don't know, a couple dozen deployments where they're going out, knocking doors, making phone calls, and so it's a really cool way to get involved. Low stakes. Come get involved. Make some really good people. There are a lot of people that are doing really well, successful in their careers, and they're coming together and finding like-minded folks to get, and sometimes not like-minded. As we know, both of us, there's a wide variety of people that identify as Republicans or, conservatives or whatever. We could get into that later. But anyway, it's a pretty big umbrella, broad tent group of people get together, mostly who love America and who want this thing to continue and to be great for them and their future families. So
but I think people are like, I don't know anything because this is me. So I didn't know
how did you get involved with all this stuff? I don't know that story.
So I worked with Jason for like 10 years and I was leaving the company and he's like, "Well, hey, before you leave, do you want to help me on my campaign?" I'm like, "What does that mean?"
You're like,
he's
"What's
like,
a
"I
campaign?"
don't know, just like help run things." I'm like really paraphrasing, but
yeah, sure.
And I was like, "Okay, great." I go to the first, I was like, we had this. So when you asked me, we had like a 3-hour long conversation.
Wow.
And like, I've always cared a lot about the country. And like, I've always felt like called to like do something. And I never knew what that something was. Like when I graduated from college, I thought about going to the Marines, like the officer training school.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's not it. And then, before I'd like make jokes, I'd like run for mayor or something. I just always felt like I had to do something.
Yeah.
And,
I could see it.
Yeah, thanks.
Mayor of Orem.
Yeah, Mayor of Orem. Yeah, great. But when Jason came to me and it just resonated. Like, this is what I'm supposed to like do right now. And so like, I think like more than anything I was doing at that point, I just felt like this is what I don't know how I'm going to do or what I'm supposed to do, but I know I'm supposed to be a part of this.
Great. And
then before I knew it, he was like calling me his campaign manager. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And then we hired a real campaign manager.
Sure.
But it was just a really great experience to be a part of that. And I made some awesome connections. And so now I'm like, okay, what really opened my eyes is how uninformed Utah voters are. And we saw that this election is I would talk to people on the campaign trail and they'd be asking me questions about things. And I'm like, well, you really know nothing if you're even asking me this. And I know nothing. And so, the plug I was going to say is like, if you know nothing, I literally didn't know a thing until January and I still pretty much know nothing. You'll watch any of my shows and be like, dude, this guy doesn't know anything. But that's okay. Like the Young Republicans offers an opportunity. If you want to
Yeah.
know things and be involved, just go there. And like, if you want to be involved, like you just got to throw your hat in the ring. But back to the point, like I realized people in Utah, I think there's a few things with it, but like we're the only state that shifted more blue during the election. Like, you think we learn a lesson from our neighboring states like Arizona and Nevada? Like,
Colorado.
oh yeah, those guys already shifted. Arizona and Colorado went way blue. Arizona's like, we messed up. I feel like they're in repentance here. Like it seemed from the way they're voting, they're all repenting.
Has it been called yet? I think as of this morning, I don't think it have. He's leading at like 5 or 6. I think Trump's up. I think Lake is behind. So show some split ticket voting there. We can talk about that. That's very interesting. But yeah, I looked at the religious groups and their voting from 2020 to 2024 and how there were some shifts. Catholics way upped for Trump. Way more Catholics voted for Trump this year, which helped make the difference in a place like Pennsylvania or Michigan. A ton of Catholics there. And then was non-denominational Christians, I feel like, shifted up. Anyway, all these groups shifted over rightward for
Pretty
Trump.
much everybody that believes in God.
Yes, except for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which actually shifted a little bit to the left, not a lot, but that was an interesting finding. And then atheist, non-religious groups, they were much more left than they were in 2020. And so pretty interesting observation and what that means for actually Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. I think one of the things that wasn't talked about enough in the 2020 election is that Donald Trump, who actually underperforms with LDS people, if you look historically, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the most reliably Republican voting church in the country. And I feel like we're seeing some cracks in that. In 2020, Nevada barely flipped blue. Arizona barely flipped blue. If you look at Carson County, or is it Clark County? Whatever Vegas is in, that bottom county right there. And then Maricopa County, Gilbert, like these are pretty strongly LDS people. I think Gilbert's 40% LDS. And so if they shift at all, and those are pretty big populations in these swing counties within swing states, that's a big deal. I don't think it was talked about enough in 2020, but anyway, it's interesting to see those dynamics play out in 2024 as well.
Why do you think that even, like, I have my own beliefs on why I think that happens, but like, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are so many positives about that culture and I should say my culture, a member of the church. I think there are really good families, really good communities, really high levels of volunteerism, really high levels of donations, all this sort of stuff. That's tithing and things, but I think there are a lot of positives. You look at the average amount of kids per family, that's way higher than I think any other group in the country is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So there are a lot of positives, and I actually think a lot of people look to our faith as an example of how we should do this or that. So I think that's really great. But a potential downside is if offending somebody is worse than standing up for lying or standing up for what you believe in. In other words, if it's better to lie than to offend your neighbor potentially, that's actually a pretty dangerous place to be in.
Well, I feel like it's a lot of omissions, like sins, like not doing things because of that. Like I think the LDS Church does a lot of things right, and I think the doctrine's great, and like, but I think there's this culture that's don't even want to necessarily tie to the LDS Church itself, but just to like the members, where it's like,
sure,
what you're saying, where it's like, oh, I don't want to offend anybody. I just want to do nothing. And you'll see this. Like, I've had so many people tell me about how they're in some sort of church leadership meeting and they're like, hey, there's this active attack right now on the family. There's this active attack on whatever thing. Like, we need to like just talk about this thing. We're not saying like we're endorsing anybody. We're not talking anything political. We're talking about like a principle of the gospel or something that's super important. But the other church leaders are too afraid. Like, oh, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to offend anybody. And it's like, okay, there's teachings that are there. So like, when is it time to just stand up for it? And so I think that's like a huge issue. And the other thing I think is like, for good or for bad, like there's church, like Utah in general is just really reliant on leadership and like following leaders and like, hey, what the leader says is the right thing to do. And we'll just do what the leader says because they're the leader, and they don't really like question it. And so I think we have leaders that are just going along with a different narrative that I think it's church members like they just go along with it and they don't do the research themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, like being kind, being a good neighbor, that's all really good stuff. But if you're willing to maybe bury your beliefs based off not offending somebody, I don't know. Here's an example. I live in Salt Lake County, but I've been all over the state in the last little while. And I don't see a ton of Trump signs. Right. And like I said earlier, he has relatively underperformed with the church, but still he easily carried the state. I see a lot of Harris Wall signs all over the place, whether it's on the freeway or Sugar House, wherever areas that I live pretty close to. So, and even in Utah County, I just didn't see a lot of Trump Vance signs, although he clearly won. So what does that mean? A lot of people aren't showing who they're voting for.
They're scared.
So, yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? So, and I get it. You've been raised here. I totally get it. Want to be a good neighbor. Want to be, it's just dangerous. If being well liked is more important than anything else, that's a dangerous place to be in, I would say.
Yeah. What I like a lot about like this network, We Are the People, is they'll go in and look at like the actual true facts and expose stuff. And I know there's episodes they've talked about things that have gone on. Like there's a Vision Utah episode they just did. So you should go watch that if you haven't. But yeah, it just is wild. I think people are just scared to stand up for what they believe in.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it can be, I've seen it a lot lately where people will send me DMs or comment, and I just feel nice being noticed.
Yeah.
So I like that people will say things to me. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah. But man, that was one of the reasons I ran, honestly, because you see Utah, and it's, I feel if we're not careful, we're Colorado 10, 15 years down the road. And you see a lot of those demographic shifts that Colorado used to be a red state, obviously. And as Denver grew, as sort of the tech scene grew a little bit there, and then there's obviously the outdoors as well, as that became more of a destination, an outdoorsy kind of place. It grew, Denver, I'm talking about, grew and grew, Boulder as well. But as these places grew, it became a purple state, and now it's pretty solidly blue. And you look at Utah, and I see the same kind of writing on the wall with Salt Lake. As that grows, as tech, we always talk about Silicon Slopes, but as those companies and things continue to draw new workers. I had a friend from New York, actually. She's from California, went to Princeton. She's a great friend of mine, Democrat, like staunch Democrat. She moved to Utah out of the blue. It was fun to have her in the state, but there's just a draw on young workers that are bringing in, folks from all over the country to Utah, which again, it's great, but the political side of it is I could see our state, as Salt Lake grows, becoming more and more, our state being more purple and then ultimately shift blue. I don't know. I don't want to be a fearmonger here. We've seen enough of that in the last couple months. We can get into the national election here in a little bit. But the reasons I ran really was to remind partially the Republican Party about debt and deficit. I was in Milwaukee for the RNC, great experience. Had a chance. I got invited by Rob to go to that. Rob Axon, the party chair. But I listened very carefully for debt and deficit. What are they talking about? What are the topics here? It was very rare. I think one person in the entire week talked about fiscal conservatism. And so you look at that, and I actually think that's the biggest issue facing America in the long run. If we're not careful, that has more power to destabilize the country than anything else. And that sounds crazy, right?
Well, we're close to it. Like, so the national debt, the amount of interest we're paying now exceeds the
military.
Yeah, the defense spending. And it's like, how far away are we? I'm not a finance guy.
Sure.
But like, how far away are we until the interest spending is all of our spending?
Yeah, you look at, man, so many scary things. The Social Security, the trust fund, which hindsight 2020, obviously we have the smartest people in the world in finance live in this country, and we chose to put those in treasury bonds and bills versus take even 30%, put that in the stock market, and we would have been solvent for, I don't know, for decades more, but we didn't. And so by 2032, 2033, somewhere in there, I think the most rosy outlook is 2036. That's going to run out, and that's going to be a big issue because you also look at trends in the different generations. 10,000 people every day turn 65. So baby boomers increasingly reliant on some of these services. And with our age group not having as many kids and all that sort of stuff, we have an issue where it's going to look like it's going to balloon on the older end and shrink a little bit on the younger end. And so that's a little dicey, I think, for the stability of programs like that. So that was a big reason I ran, getting young people involved and being okay to say that you're conservative, that it's okay to say you love your country, restoring a sense of American idealism in young people. I feel like I said that line right there like 20,000 times in the campaign. I haven't said it since, so I'm going to say that again. And then returning us back to our limited government, federalism, separation of powers, this basic stuff. And so that was really the platform, and people liked it. So it was great.
Well, and that's what I think is scary is it seems like the country realized that we need to get back to that, but Utah didn't. And like, I think a lot of these people that lean more left, for some reason, have unfollowed me and weirdly.
Oh, that's weird.
And I guess I didn't follow a lot of them back. Maybe they blocked me so I don't see their posts. But I see like almost no lefty posts except on X because I actively tried to follow people that are on all sides to get all the information and to like really just see where everyone's coming from. Because I truly am like one that I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm like a Republican through and through. Like wasn't even a Republican till this race.
Sure.
I was just like a libertarian independent.
Yeah.
And like I'd say I'm like a Rand Paul kind of guy.
Sure.
And the thing that's interesting is people are just like, oh, like you're just so far right. And I'm like, I don't know if I really am. But the people that just speak facts, it just seems like all of a sudden turn far right because people just are so quick to overlook just what is actually happening.
Yeah, and I think the Democrat Party. So, how many days ago was the election? Tuesday. Today's Saturday. Okay, it's been a long week. A lot of late nights watching, watching it, seeing what's going on, and following the election very closely. This is like for any political fans, this is like the Super Bowl of the 4 years, like,
and especially this one.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but you look at some of these exit polls, and this is to your point about common sense and things like that. I think the Democrat Party is going to have a very they're having an awakening right now that they somehow in the last 3-4 years, and we can get into why. They're like, what have we done? We've lost all moderate, and we've lost middle class. America. Yeah. The Republican Party has become the party of the working class. And if you look at some of the demographic shifts from 20 to 24, wild, most notably Latinos and Latinas, like hard shift. I think 55% of Latinos voted for Donald Trump, and 45% of total Hispanics voted. Even after the Puerto Rico joke from Tony Hinchcliffe.
I don't think that affected anybody.
Yeah. No, you look at Osceola County in Florida, which is like heavily Puerto Rican, that carried Trump. So Puerto Rican vote carried Trump in that county. I think they liked
it. To be brutally honest, I think Puerto Rico just likes being mentioned. And I think they understand the context of like, oh, yeah, we have a big garbage problem in Puerto Rico. But like... For example, I'm this way. Like, I guess I was just saying this with the comments. Like, if someone says something mean about me on social media, I'm like, you noticed me?
Yeah.
Like, thank you. And so I think it just is like, oh, like they're being included in the group.
Sure.
And I think it's lighthearted.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first saw that, I was probably way too online, but they're gonna make it a national issue, this MSG event. And make it this is an election altering thing. This is the October surprise. One of the 5 that were mentioned, right? That none of them actually panned out. But I look at that and I was like, do you have a roast comedian, at this late stage in an election cycle? I probably wouldn't have done that. But at the end of the day, did it make a difference at all? No. And
the speech was funny though. The speech was so funny. Like I watched it, I was like, I can't believe this.
Yeah, you look at the groups that actually swung leftward from 20 to 24. You had a small percentage of white folks, and then educated and high earners, and non-religious folks. Okay, that is your group. I remember in 2012, the Democrat Party was talking about this group that would forever deliver Democrat victories going forward, and that was white educated folks. College educated folks, and then minorities. And of course, they came out for Obama and all this different stuff. These two groups together would forever, Democrats will win forever. That was the thought. And that was the prevailing idea. You look now, it has totally, totally shifted. every minority group shifted rightward from 20 to 24. Women, and it was going to be this big election about women coming to save the country, and they're going to vote out Donald Trump, and abortion is on the ballot, and all this sort of stuff. That all backfired. I think women 7% more voted for Donald Trump than from 20 to 24, and so I think that moment of common sense, and you look at the people that were coming out to support, people like David Sachs, Elon Musk, groups like that was like, man, I feel like the Democratic Party's lost its way. Elon Musk waited for 4-6 hours, waited in line to meet Barack Obama back in the day. This is a Democrat. They've all shifted over because they've seen what's gone on in the last 4 years. There's a lot of issues, a lot of big problems from the last 4 years. There's immigration, the inflation, which people say, hey, Donald Trump started this, and Build Back Better, American Rescue Plan. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling right now.
No, this is
pretty
good.
fired up about this stuff. But Build Back Better, American Rescue Plan, these were all they warned Biden and Harris, this will be inflationary if you pass this stuff. This is Larry Summers, the economic advisor to Barack Obama. This wasn't, right-leaning folks. He said, if you pass these and do the spending, we're going to have inflation. What happened? 40-year high inflation.
And they just want to ignore that.
Yeah.
They're trying to say, oh, we're good now. Like, we're back to normal levels. That's what everyone's trying to say.
It has come back down. It has come back down to just over 2% and things like that. I'm not sure that we're out of the woods yet, inflation-wise. If we cut, as we are cutting rates, we'll see what happens. It's this Wednesday or Thursday they cut rates again.
Well, I just think it's convenient. It's just convenient that it's happening this year.
Yeah.
Because, like, if it was, say this is just an ultra hypothetical, but it's like, say they stay, I guess it's not. Say they stayed in power, but without an election year. So say Biden goes on 8 years, or Biden goes and he passes his torch to Kamala. There's no race at all.
Right.
There's no election, so they're not trying to make things look better for polls or anything. They just get a consecutive 8 years. Yeah. Would the rates have come? Would inflation have dropped? And I don't think it would have. I think it would have continued in the same trend it was going, because I think a lot of things they did, like, oh, we have to do this or we're going to lose.
Yeah, you definitely saw that. Most notably saw that with the immigration. That wasn't an issue until they saw in the polls that it was. When I say they, I'm talking about Democrats, Biden, Harris. For the longest time, it was a historically bad situation at the border. And then when it became politically expedient to make it an issue, there was that bipartisan border bill that was going to be passed. If you actually read that, I'm sure your listeners did read it. Oh my gosh. That was not the most strict.
Maybe they did. I think with this audience is really great.
They're really yeah.
But
it was not the strict. It was Ukraine spending. It was a lot of stuff. It was a few
please
more.
Come into America bill. Because it's like, it was still, because like what it's saying, like 5,000 illegals could enter per day, and so it was just codifying the amount of people that could come in illegally. Like, it was saying, it's good to come in illegally. We'll help you come in illegally. Come in this many people, and it was just put it into code that we would let it happen.
Yeah, to your point though about them retaining power. People said Kamala's the candidate of change. Let's turn the page. Meanwhile, she's the vice president right now. And the thing that I would remind folks is 12 out of the last 16 years, there's been a Democrat in the White House. And so when you have 70% of the country saying we're going in the wrong direction, and they're trying to turn the page on Donald Trump, and it was Obama, Trump for one term, then Biden. That's 12 out of the last 16 years. Another Harris. And so what Trump was in this campaign was he was the candidate of change, which sounds crazy to some people, but that's what he was. Kamala's in there. She said herself in an interview when they gave her a chance. It was on The View, happened all over the place, where they said, "How will you distance yourself from Biden? What main differences do you have?" And she said, "Nothing comes to mind." And so you're running right in parallel, dovetailing with a president who has 70% of the people say the country's going in the wrong direction, and she was the lowest approval rating of any vice president in modern American history.
Well, at the same time, she'd say, "Nothing. I wouldn't do anything differently." But then she's like, "When I get into office, I'm going to fix,
right,
make sure the groceries are affordable." And it's like, so you wouldn't do anything different, but you're going to do a bunch of things different.
That was I think I've said this like twice now, this phrase, but I think there's a lot of soul searching going on for Democrats right now, and it was a historically bad result for the party. And look, anyone that was following the betting odds and some of these really keyed in pollsters, Atlas Intel, by the way, got to give a quick shout out there. 20 and 24, the most accurate pollster on earth. It's a small group of like 10 in Brazil. they call 2020 almost perfectly, and then 2024 they predicted every state correctly. So I'm sure your listeners know who they are, but that is like, hey, look, someone can get lucky once in 2020, but they proved it again in 2024. And so I'm a huge fan of Atlas Intel. They were calling a Trump victory pretty handily. And then if you look at the betting odds, which have only, I believe, been wrong twice since the 1860s. There's been this political betting markets that have been gone on. It's not actually until this year hasn't been allowed in America, but has been recently allowed. There's a company called Kalshi, I don't know how to pronounce it, but you can now legally bet in America on political outcomes. But they had Trump at like 60-40. And so you look at all this stuff and it was pointing to a Trump victory. But man, the more online you are and the more like disconnected you are from actual people, you're like, oh, who's going to win? Right. And I think that could have been the issue with the Democratic Party. They were focused more on,
mainstream media. Mainstream media.
Yeah,
like
sure.
when you're watching mostly mainstream media and they show those clips of like every news channel, they have like the exact same script across the whole country. And it's like say the same thing over and over and over and over again. But the thing that scares me, I mean, do you have any tinfoil down here? This is like my conspiracy theorist moment. Is I'm following along with my theory here that I don't think anyone in politics is stupid, and I don't think the Democrat Party is stupid.
Totally,
I think they knew it was going to be this bad. I really do think that. I think they had Biden and
internal
like,
polling and
I think
sure.
they're like, I mean, lack of a better word, I think they're like we're effed, and so they're like pulled Biden, and they're like we could put in a good candidate. Or they're like, or we could just put in a terrible one, lose this one for sure. Trump's only going to have 4 years. So why don't we play the long game and look 8 to 12 years from now look out forward and like, let's tee up. Let's just wait and save our good candidates for later.
That's a hot take,
That's what I think they're doing.
I like these, one or two hot takes everyone has it or never. Like mine right there is that because everyone's like, why didn't Josh Shapiro? Why wasn't he the VP pick? A moderate, well-liked governor of Pennsylvania. My take there is that she actually asked him, and he just said no. Look, that's a hot take. We'll probably never hear of that. Why she didn't take Josh Shapiro? Why she didn't take Mark Kelly, who Senator of Arizona, well-liked, NASA. He can say I've presided over a border state, and it was Trump's fault for canceling that border bill. He could have said a lot of that sort of stuff. My hot take, look, this will never be proven. I feel like they both said no because they look like this is not a winning situation. And so I think Waltz was the first one that said yes.
Well, my thing is I'll take even a step further that the Democrat Party was like, we're saving them. But with Shapiro, like I think they're afraid of losing like all the Palestine people, pro-Palestine. They're like, we have a Jewish person in here because they're anti-Jewish, right? Like right now, like they're anti-Israel.
There were some stats that have come out on the Muslims vote in particularly Michigan, which is the highest concentration of Muslims in the entire country. You take Dearborn, they had, I think the mayor of Dearborn, a mayor of one of those little towns around there is Muslim. He came out and endorsed Trump in the run-up to the election. And, I think the Israel-Palestine conflict, 100%. I think now this group has some political chips because now they need to be courted. I think it's been a reliably Democratic vote at this point. I'm not sure. And maybe they'll swing back in 28. Who really knows? But that's another group, along with the Catholics and union workers. We saw the polling from the Teamsters, the internal polling from the Teamsters that showed they were all in for Biden and they shifted over to Trump. I think that's really wild stuff. And so, like you said, what I like, love him or hate him, like Donald Trump has created this wide group of Republicans, or like you said, you weren't really political. You were just kind of an independent libertarian. These people are all welcome in the Republican Party now.
Well, it's a new America. Like that's really the thing is like you have ultra establishment Republicans siding with the left, like the Cheneys. So it's now I feel like it's tyranny, where people are centralized government versus decentralized government. And it's weird because our country did this one other time and there was like a civil war about it. But it's like really centralized government versus decentralized government. And it's like wild to see all these people with liberal ideas. So like I have friends that are like liberal, but I wouldn't even say they're Trumpers, but they're like, this is the way it's got to go.
Sure.
Because it's like, okay, like when can we get common sense?
Yeah.
And then we can talk about the issues that have been historically Democrat, Republican, but now it's just gone so far that yeah, you have like RFK.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like when he was running when he I think this was like 8 or 9 months ago, I was like, I could probably vote for this guy. And I was getting trashed by everybody. And they were like, dude, are you serious? This guy's full of lies. He makes things up. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like everything I've heard from him, not everything. There's a lot of things he says I don't agree with personally. But that's when I get to there's like the classical Democrat things that they run for, which he still believes. But there's some things he was saying that I'm like, I don't know about how that's going to work, man. That sounds pretty... I don't want government controlling that stuff. But the majority of things he was saying, I was like, he at least sounds reasonable. And then we got further in and I got pretty on board the Trump train. But then Trump says, he's like, RFK, all them come together. Those same people that were like, RFK is crazy are telling me how great he is. And I'm like, bro, I'm like taking crazy pills right now.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the main points, let's say the Democratic Party of the 60s and 70s, anti-war, freedom of speech, leave me alone, like just let me be a human being. That, I think, predominantly that has all been taken over to the right.
Oh, 100%.
Which is very interesting. And I think the result of that is what we saw in 2024, this election. Look at the exit polls. I know that your viewers and listeners do. Just like a punishing and powerful referendum on the Democrat Party, and defund the police and open borders and Green New Deal, this sort of stuff. And by the way, there are moderate Democrats that are just as upset about this as moderate Republicans and hardcore. And they're looking, and I think this will be really interesting to see how the Democratic Party reshapes itself in the wake of this historic loss. It could go it could go a few ways, but I see two things happening. One is the sort of the more establishment Democrats retake control and the party swings back a little bit to try to recapture all these voters that they've lost in the last 4 years. The other possibility, perhaps probably the lower likely outcome, is that the more populist progressive left, there's like a re-scrambling of power and they're in charge of the party. Look, I don't know. As a Republican, for the good of the country, I actually hope that one doesn't happen. I hope they swing back to the middle. I think populism is a longer conversation there, but we'll see how that reshift happens with the party. So,
I think it was planned. We'll see.
Huh?
I think it was planned. Well, I guess the good point, like playing devil's advocate to myself,
sure,
which I try to do often.
Smart.
You're like, okay, they knew they were going to lose, right? They planned to lose. They knew it was going to happen. But then they spent like the most ever that they've possibly spent. Like, why would they spend so much money on this campaign if they knew they were going to lose? You know what I mean? So that's. I mean, I get into it myself, but here you've probably seen this on social media a lot. Like a lot of things people have been saying, like the posts of obviously people crying. I think I get those a lot because I follow like a lot of conservative-y people.
Sure.
And so they're like making fun of them. But my wife, she gets a lot of like the people that are like really liberal that are like scared for their futures. And I think I would love to just
dive into
some of these.
All right, let's roll it out. Let's see what we have cooking.
So this first one's on immigration. This is actually one of the few points that I'm like, I mean, that's not necessarily that bad. But it's like the thought of immigrants being scared of being mass deportation promises make me very angry. And I'm like, okay. Like, so I think there's a lot to unpack just in that one.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of, it sounds like we're going to read through a few of these. There's a lot of doomsdaying going on right now. And I actually think there's a lot, again, maybe we're both online too much and not talking to the American people enough, but you look at some of the rhetoric and fear-mongering pre and post the election is and it's almost like a gotcha. I told you so. Look at what's going to happen. Like women, we warned you, kind of thing. Like I see a lot of that sort of stuff going back, not back and forth from more, I'd say liberal commentators and thoughts. But my question and challenge to all those people would be, if you want Trump to fail just so you can say that you're right, and by extension, if you want the country to fail, because as the president does, the country goes type of thing. If you want Trump to fail, and by extension, you want the country to fail, so let's take out the middle piece. If you want the country to fail just so you can say you're right, you're in a really bad place, right? Like that is not. You're either acting or blinded by hatred, or like there you have other problems going on.
Just way too tribal.
Everyone should want the best for the country. I was really happy to see there was the strike by the longshoremen, oarsmen. I forget what it was called along the East Coast.
Yeah.
There you go. And that was a good thing when that ended. Okay, it was bad for Trump, I guess, because if that had gone on and had really impacted the supply chain in America, that would have been another bad thing against Biden-Harris campaign administration. But it was an objectively good thing that ended, and they figured it out. We can get into the nuance of the demands they made and how good or bad that is for the kind of the success, long-term success and innovation of the country. But in that moment, it ended and it was good for us. Like anyone that was a Republican was like, dang it, the strike ended and that's better for Biden. You should check your humanity. Like that's not good, right? And so I see a lot of that right now of people that are just so upset, so distraught, like you said, the tears. And I hope that they can give it a fair chance. I think Vivek talked about this a couple days ago. Like, just see how the country goes. If it goes well, I don't expect you to join to become a Republican, but I at least be open to the thought. And conversely, if things don't go well, then we Republicans should be open to the idea that what can be improved, X, Y, Z. Anyway, that was a long tangent, but. Yeah, some of the interesting stuff I've been seeing online.
But I think that's just so true. And like when people are specifically saying like, "Oh, I'm scared for immigrants," it's like I think they're really quick to overlook any like what has actually been said by Trump and his team about illegal immigrants. Because it's like if you go look into anything, it's like okay, they're saying okay, we need to close the border because it's unsafe. That's been a nonpartisan issue now. I think everyone agrees the border's unsafe.
Look at the polling. Yeah. A majority of Americans agree.
75%. Okay, let's make America safe. Let's close the borders. And then they said, okay, let's start looking at the people that are criminals, the people that are doing criminal things, and let's deport them. So it's like,
in jail.
If you feel bad cases, for the immigrants that are being deported, it's like, okay, you must be hanging out with sex traffickers, drug dealers, thieves, people who are doing crimes that they're in prison, and they're going to be like a weight on our prison system and our tax dollars. So if you want those people to stay in the U.S., I think you gotta reevaluate your friend group because those are the people that are going to be deported first. So like that's where I think people are like, I'm so sad for immigrants. It's like, dude, the immigrants are going to stay. They're going to figure out a way to make it happen, but it's like the people getting deported are going to be the ones that are criminals.
Yeah, you just have to look at the exit polls of 2024. Huge shift over in basically every minority group. And when you think of immigrants, at least I think the common thought is Hispanics, right? Coming to the southern border, whether through Nicaragua, Venezuela, Mexico, wherever, like that path. But Hispanics flipped towards Trump in a hard way. Hispanic males was 55%. It was less on the females, but as a whole group, 45% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump. So I think they're the most vocal about, hey, like, look, I did this. If they're voting, that means they're legal. And they're like, look, I did it the right way.
You'd hope.
I did it the right way, and everyone should wait their turn the way I did it, type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that I think to your point on immigration, the American people are pretty much aligned behind that, including Hispanics. So, well, and then not in every case, but yeah.
The other heavy one I'm seeing is like the women's rights. People somehow women are losing rights in healthcare, and it's like there's this great video where they're like, because I might be super uninformed, but I'm assuming this is all just only abortion things. And there's this video. We'll just play it right now. We'll just plug it in here. But here, I'll just play it right now, and then you can show it on the screen. But
Yeah.
it's actually wild that it's in Congress. So it's
Yeah.
a video of Congress asking about women's rights that are actively being taken away.
Let's check it out.
Are there any states where women face prosecution for having an abortion?
No.
Are there any states that criminalize miscarriage
No.
or that care for a miscarriage?
No.
Are there any states that criminalize removing an ectopic pregnancy?
No.
Are there any states that prohibit life-saving care for the mother?
No.
Are there any states where women have to be actively dying for a doctor to be able to act for her care?
No.
There's been a lot of rhetoric in this that I'm concerned pushes people away from getting access to health care. Vice President Harris, in a speech recently, said that women were being arrested and facing prosecution for experiencing miscarriages. Ms. Hackler, do you know of a single instance where a woman has been arrested for having a miscarriage or getting health care for that?
No, treatment for miscarriage is allowed under the law, and there have been instances where I think that one example of that that's been pointed to is misleading because the woman, I think she was in Ohio, the charges against her were not abortion related, and so it's misleading to use that as an example.
It's not only misleading, but it scares women away from getting access to health care. And it leads women to not go get health care treatment when they desperately need it.
That just states all the facts in Congress. So, for example, if she was lying there, supposedly she should go to prison.
There was a lot of fear mongering, a lot of talk about Project 2025. There are folks, and I don't want to cherry pick these examples of people talking about on TikTok. People say whatever they want, wherever they want, type of thing, right? But there are people that are like, ladies, delete your period tracker apps because they're going to target you based off that. There's all this fear, and so I think that the fear mongering isn't positive for anybody. And abortion clearly wasn't on the ballot like people thought it would be. I think it was a little bit more in 2022. But now that it's a state's issue, I think it's settling into the psyche of the people that the Dobbs decision overturned probably the most tumultuous thing, at least in the last, I don't know how many generations. But
This is in the 70s?
It's like it was 50 years, I think, that it had been passed. It was 50 years, but it was the hottest thing always, abortion. And now handle it at your local legislature, and talk to your local rep. It's a lot easier to handle things. I actually think I wish more things would go back to the states because I believe it turns the temperature down a little bit when you make these really big decisions in Washington, D.C. that affect everybody across the entire country. The less of those, the better. Like handle that stuff at the state ledge level where you have a lot more impact. Do you have more impact over your state senator or state representative than you do over, Mike Lee, John Curtis, any of these people? You have a lot more say there. And so, and by the way, we've seen a lot of stuff on abortion in some of these pretty conservative states that have actually flipped away than what people would have thought to Kansas and there were a lot on I think it was
Florida.
Yeah. I think,
Florida voted pro-abortion.
Did it really?
I think so.
Okay, I thought it was.
I could be wrong,
I don't
though.
know. But you've seen a lot of these different states that have taken. It was Ohio as well, Kansas. Anyway, but that's a lot more states' rights. I wish a lot more would be handled there. I don't think we can even afford to make these decisions at the
I agree
at the national
completely.
level. Yeah.
Like the founding fathers were so genius, and like there's these numbered and enumerated powers of federal government, and then the rest was meant to go back to the states. And this might be like a hot take, but like I think almost all laws that are made in Washington are unconstitutional. Like if you look at the Constitution, if you look at it just straight through that lens, I'm like the Supreme Court's been doing a pretty poor job these last 80 years because I don't think the federal government should have been dealing in any of those things. They should have looked at them from the interpretation of the law section and been like, this doesn't go by the Constitution, so maybe we should have the states decide on this.
The sad thing is that the more decisions that are made in the court level, and take even the Trump trials and stuff in New York and all this stuff, and Jack Smith and all these people in the legal system. The more that decisions like that are made in the legal system, they should be interpreting the law, the Supreme Court. The more big, heavy-hitting decisions that are made in the Supreme Court, the more politicized it gets. And again, that's bad for the country because they lose faith in the institutions. And and this is one of the reasons I think that Kamala lost, actually, was that she talked about packing the court, talked about removing the filibuster, all this stuff that is very progressive. Let's not forget, this is the most progressive person to win the nomination of a major party. And I don't know how long, maybe ever.
Weird word you used.
Yeah, sorry, she didn't win the. Yeah, there you go. The most progressive person ever anointed but you know what I'm trying to say. The most progressive person at the top of the ticket, like real. That. She was calling for massive reform, packing courts, the filibuster. Everyone's trying to make it about Trump. In fact, I think. If you were a Democrat, you were putting the spotlight on Donald Trump, trying to take it away from Kamala Harris. And maybe that's why, we can talk about podcasts here in a second. We're obviously on a long-form podcast here, the power of the long-form podcast. But anyway, they wanted to keep the spotlight off her and reveal that she's actually incredibly progressive, way more progressive than the average American. She's a progressive prosecutor from California. How is she going to relate very well with union workers in Pennsylvania, Hispanics in Arizona, all this different stuff? She's very progressive.
Well, it's because she's middle class. She was raised in a middle class family.
Yeah. What was the other thing? I'm the only person in this race to have prosecuted transnational gangs and criminal organizations. How many times? I heard that like 25 times. Anyway.
She's just out of touch. Well, I think that leads into your point perfectly, like what you're saying about the long form podcast is like, it really is a battle of tyranny and unification of powers at the federal level versus small federal government and then everything being covered at the state level. And it's clear. It just is so clear. It's just so obvious that media is all left. Like if you go look at the numbers this time around, I think it was like 80 to 90% left.
Positive numbers coverage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Towards the Democrat, which is like, that's so out of touch with how the actual voters voted. Like it just is. And I think as you look at a lot of these issues are so nuanced and there's so many things. It's so easy to just take little like clips and just piece them up to your agenda. And you're like, oh, look, like the one they did with Trump where they're like, he's like, I don't care if they love it. I don't care if the women like it. I'm going to do it. And they're like, oh, see, he's taking away all of your power as women when he's just saying that all these illegals are coming in. All the illegals are coming in the borders. They're coming into your areas, your families. I'm going to protect them, protect everybody, even women. I don't even care if they want me to or not. I'm going to protect them. But like, that's just a perfect example of like the mainstream media just painting whatever picture they wanted. And and I think what I like about this is it can even be more Utah focused and more focused.
Yeah.
Which you'd think we'd have. I think there's like 4 stations in Utah, but nothing covers this.
Yeah. It's really, you look at, I believe in the survival of the fittest, the market economy, and you're starting to see, what was it? I'm not going to cite the stats at this point, but there's been a big drop off. ABC, NBC. It was reverberating around the interwebs of X because you'd see, a lot of this legacy stuff in deep decline in viewership. But then I think in order to keep eyeballs, they're having to shift a little bit. Why do you think you had Scott Jennings on CNN? Why would you bring on Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, to be a common, to be on there a lot? I think. Because Scott Jennings and those discussions they'd had after whatever, like the 5 or 6 people around the table, that was they got a lot of views on X, and so I think that they're having to shift, realizing that they've fallen out of favor. Why do you think Jeff Bezos didn't allow the Washington Post to endorse Kamala Harris? Now that endorsement or non-endorsement didn't actually do anything to the voters. But I think he's viewing the Washington Post in decline. I haven't seen their stats, but if it's anything like some of the more ABC, NBC sorts of stuff, they're in deep decline too. And so it's going to be survival of the fittest. People that are drawing the eyeballs are going to get, they're going to get paid, and so they're going to keep doing what they're doing. So I think you're going to see a shift a little bit rightward of some of these groups. And the alternative media podcasters, like they really are. It's that scene in Captain Phillips where he's like, I'm the captain now. It's like, we are the media now. And I think that's really interesting. The whole debacle with the Rogan and Harris and Trump and Vance, That's a wild situation. Trump goes on there. They chop it up for like 2 hours, 50 minutes. And then Harris had heard that he was going to go, that Trump was going to be on there. And so she's like, wait, let me come on the podcast. And he's like, yeah, sure. Come anytime, late at night, early morning, drink a Red Bull is what he said. Let's just get it done. And she said, well, I want to keep it to, I've heard it either 45 minutes or an hour, and you have to come to me. And he's like, no, I'd prefer you come to us and come to the studio, you know? And Vance, the next thing I heard when I saw that go down, he took the slot. He's like, all right, I'll come do it. He shows up in Austin and they do it. And there was a Fetterman and then Elon, like the day before, it was just like this wild. And the last I saw, Trump had like 55 million views on Rogan. Vance had like, I don't know, 15 to 20 million. And he did his a couple days later, or it was the following day. But you compare that with the SNL appearance by Colin, which had 5 million that night watching. So it's pretty interesting.
There's Utah influencers that get more than that.
Oh, yeah, exactly
There's like
right.
Utah. I think the Mormon wives get more than that.
Oh, man. Let's save that for a different podcast. But, it's really interesting. And I think we'll see, in order to compete for eyeballs, we're going to see a little bit of shift. Because this election it's very clear that the progressive loud megaphones, those are going to be taken away. And the media is going to have to shift back to moderation, or else I'm saying mainstream, those main channels we're talking about. Because of course you've got Fox News and this different stuff, but I think that the average media channel is going to have to come back to the middle, and I think it's healthy for America. I really do. So,
well, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah,
like I think having people like you around, voice to help guide people where can people join Young Republicans? What do they need to do?
Yeah, UtahYoungRepublicans.com will be a place you can drop your information there, join, and come join the ranks. It's a fun group. It's a fun, dynamic. I said fun twice. Fun, dynamic group. We hang out, meet the elected officials. We go up to Capitol Hill and at the Capitol here in Utah, and we meet the legislators there. It's a really good time. So, book clubs, barbecues, whatever. Like we're open to any ideas, and it's a good time. So,
and where can they follow you?
That's such a good question. When we were gearing up to run for Congress, and our campaign team was like, all right, so what's your Facebook? What's your Instagram? What's your X? And I was like, all right, I don't have any of that. And so I have a little bit like remnant from the mission, but I have zero social media. I should probably change that.
Yeah, you should freaking do it. Yes. Because I think your points are so obvious, like it's what people need to hear. And I mean, the more involved you can be, especially youth, but not like people in general, you should pay attention, but people need to hear from you.
Thank
but
you.
Go join Young Republicans, and thanks everybody. This is Culture Wars.
Appreciate it.